I found out she was cheating on me from a Slack notification. That's how fast life can tilt. One second you're making dinner plans, the next you're staring at a message meant for someone else, watching your future detonate in real time. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I'd just wrapped a pitch meeting and was still riding the high of not stumbling over my words. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even logged into her account. She'd borrowed my laptop last week and forgot to sign out. That one mistake let everything unravel. The message said, "He's clueless. I'll come over after his Zoom. Same plan." Sent from her to Caleb, my manager. My throat dried up instantly. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood, that maybe this was some joke or wrong Caleb. But her profile photo was there, her name, his, and the timestamp lined up with my schedule. I didn't confront her right away. I closed the laptop and sat in that silence that feels like your brain buffering. My hands were sweating, my stomach was tight. I told myself not to spiral, but denial doesn't work when the facts are screaming. She got home around 6, kissed my cheek like always, asked how my day was, then went to the kitchen to pour wine. I stared at her back and felt something I couldn't name. Grief, maybe, or betrayal with teeth. I waited 2 more days, collecting evidence I didn't even want. She used our apartment like a staging ground. Texts, secret calls when she thought I was asleep, little gaps in her stories that I'd once waved off as forgetfulness. Caleb, though, that's what made it a different kind of cruel. He wasn't just my boss. He was someone I'd trusted. The guy who vouched for me when I moved to Seattle. The guy who said, "You two are solid, like real solid." I confronted her on Saturday. Not dramatic, no yelling, just facts. "You've been sleeping with Caleb," I said. She froze. That 3-second silence told me everything. Then the lies came, but they were flimsy. She wasn't used to being caught. "It's not what you think," she tried. "You said I was clueless," I replied. Silence again. She broke down then, or pretended to. Tears, apologies, the whole remorse routine. She said it was a mistake. She said it was stress, confusion, that she still loved me. But love doesn't leave digital footprints like crime scenes. I moved out that night. No theatrics. Just grabbed my essentials and left the key on the counter. She followed me to the door, crying, calling my name like it would rewind anything. I stayed in a cheap motel the first night. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking, how long had she been lying to my face? How many times had I thanked Caleb for helping my career while he was dismantling my life behind the scenes? Over the next week, the truth spilled faster than I expected. Turns out I wasn't the first guy she'd cheated on. I was just the quietest. And Caleb, he had a pattern too. Interns, new hires, me. I guess I was a bonus, a promotion with benefits. The rage didn't come all at once. It simmered. It built in places I didn't know rage could live, like in my lungs, my fingertips, my memory. Every time I replayed the last few months, I saw the signs I ignored. The late nights, the evasions, the way she started saying, "You're paranoid," like it was a defense strategy. I should have exposed them immediately. I should have torched their reputations, screamed it to HR, to social media, to anyone who'd listen. But I didn't want revenge, not yet. I wanted strategy. So I smiled when I saw Caleb at work that Monday. Let him pat me on the shoulder and say, "Rough weekend?" like he didn't already know. I nodded, said, "Yeah, but I'm managing," and walked away like nothing had changed. He thought I was weak. That was his first mistake. I spent the next 3 months quietly collecting everything, emails, messages, meeting logs. I rebuilt my reputation in silence while he got sloppier, bragging in private Slack channels, taking longer lunches with her, whispering during team calls like no one noticed. But they noticed. People always notice. They just pretend not to until someone forces them to see. By month 4, I had everything I needed, a complete picture. Not just of the affair, but of the misuse of company resources, the manipulation of female employees, the favoritism, the threats. I could have leaked it to HR. Instead, I went higher. I reached out to someone I knew at a tech blog, not a gossip site, a real investigative outlet. I gave them everything, anonymously. Within a week, the story hit. Not just Caleb, but multiple names, patterns, screenshots, dates. The fallout was instant. He was fired. So was she. Statements were made, investigations launched. She texted me once after it broke, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't reply, because this wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't even about Caleb. This was about the lie they both tried to bury me under, and the fact that I clawed my way out. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wasn't looking for fame. I just wanted them to lose the thing they valued most, control. And I wanted to remind them that the quiet ones are never as clueless as they seem. 3 months after the article, I got a cease and desist letter, plain envelope, no return address, the kind of paper that pretends to be professional while hiding a threat. The letter claimed Redline was facilitating defamation, harboring unverified allegations, and undermining the reputation of private individuals. No names, but I didn't need them. This was Caleb's new move. He'd been quiet, too quiet, which meant he wasn't finished, just repositioning. People like him don't give up. They wait, they switch tactics. When charm fails, they try intimidation, and when that fails, they call their lawyers. The letter wasn't legally binding, but it was loud, a message, back off. This isn't your fight anymore, but that was the mistake. It was never just mine. Ellis, my partner in the project, reviewed the letter and laughed. "They're bluffing," he said. "If they had a real case, we'd already be in court." Still, something shifted in me. I started checking over my shoulder again, reading every new user report like it might be a trap. I knew the stories were real. I could feel them in my bones. But fear doesn't always care about logic, especially when it knocks with a law firm's signature. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the ways this could play out. What if they did sue? What if they found a way to shut us down? What if they painted me as the unstable ex, the bitter employee, the dangerous accuser? It had worked before, on others, on me. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. The next morning, I posted the letter, scrubbed of details, legal safe, on our Redline blog. No drama, just truth. When silence fails, some try fear. We won't stop, because truth isn't defamation, it's protection. The response was instant. Not just messages of support, but stories. More stories. Women and men from different industries, cities, lives, each one a thread in a much bigger pattern. That's when the journalist reached out again. She'd covered the original story and wanted to do a follow-up, this time on Redline, on what we were building, on the system behind the headlines. I hesitated. I didn't want to be the face of anything. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted people to be believed. But Ellis said something that stuck. "If you don't tell the story, someone else will, and they won't get it right." So I agreed. The interview wasn't easy. She asked real questions about motive, about anger, about what I wanted now that everything was out in the open. I told her the truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted safety. For people to be able to show up to work and not have to armor themselves before walking through the door. I told her I was tired, but I wasn't done. The piece ran under the headline, "From Broken Trust to Digital Shield, the Startup Fighting Workplace Silence." It got picked up nationally, which meant more traffic, more scrutiny, and eventually a visit I didn't expect. My father. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since I'd told him about the breakup and he'd shrugged like I was overreacting. He always thought emotions were a luxury, said things like, "That's life, people cheat, move on." But now he was at my door. He held the article in his hand, said nothing for a while, Then, finally, I didn't realize what you were really dealing with. I didn't answer. I just let him sit with it. He stayed for an hour, asked questions he should have asked years ago about how long it went on, why I didn't say anything sooner, what it felt like to be erased in real time. I told him the truth. It felt like screaming in a soundproof room. Everyone could see me yelling, but no one heard it. He didn't apologize, but he didn't try to explain it away either. That was enough. Sometimes closure isn't about forgiveness, it's about being seen. That weekend, I got another message from Ria, the former intern. She said she'd started therapy, that Redline helped her find a lawyer, that she was finally filing a complaint against her old manager. Then she wrote something that caught me off guard. I didn't need justice to feel whole, I just needed to know it wasn't my fault. That stayed with me, because that's the part they never talk about in revenge stories, the aftermath. The way truth doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, like digging through wreckage for pieces of yourself and realizing you've outgrown them, but you keep digging anyway. A month later, we hit our milestone, 1,000 reports across 38 states, from baristas to engineers to healthcare workers. Some were anonymous, some gave names, all were raw. That's when I realized something had shifted, not just in me, but in the system. They could still try to sue us, they could send more letters, but they couldn't unwrite what had already been written. The stories were out there now, and they weren't mine to erase. It wasn't a lawsuit, at least not at first. It was a petition filed with the state's business commission requesting an investigation into Redline's operations. On paper, it sounded neutral, an inquiry into potential ethical violations and the protection of employer reputation. In practice, it was a warning shot. We had 6 weeks to respond. It felt strange walking into a legal process where I wasn't the one being accused of lying, but where my credibility was still under scrutiny. The same system that had ignored people like me for years was now trying to decide if we were too loud for their liking. I sat beside Ellis at the preliminary hearing, and for the first time since this started, I felt something like doubt. Not fear, not regret. Just the creeping thought, what if we lose and it all disappears? The room wasn't packed, but it didn't need to be. There were 2 lawyers on the other side, sent by a consortium of HR professionals and corporate reps. They didn't mention Caleb by name, but they didn't have to. He had become a symbol for both sides. The lead attorney stood up and called Redline a digital vigilante platform that damages reputations with unverified claims. I didn't flinch, but inside my hands curled. When it was our turn, Ellis stood and calmly laid out our facts. We do not publish names. We do not allow anonymous public posts. We connect users with legal and counseling resources. We are not a court. We're a door to one. I added just one line at the end. The companies calling us dangerous are the same ones who made us necessary. The panel didn't respond, just took notes, faces blank. Afterward, we had 10 minutes outside before reporters started circling. Ellis handled them. I didn't. I wasn't interested in headlines. I wanted the truth to survive the paperwork. Later that night, I got a DM. The name caught me off guard, Daniel Ruiz. He used to work under Caleb. I remembered him vaguely, quiet, smart, polite to a fault. He left the company after 6 months. No drama, no explanation. His message was short. I didn't know how to say this before, but I saw everything. I still have the emails. If you need a witness, I'll speak. My pulse kicked up. I asked if he was sure. His reply came fast. Yeah, I stayed silent once. I'm done with that. The next morning, I forwarded his info to our legal team. Week by week, more stories came in. A software engineer in Detroit, a woman in finance who had documented 5 years of manipulation, a restaurant worker who'd been blacklisted after reporting her manager. And then came something I didn't expect. A letter from Caleb's former fiancée. I didn't even know he'd been engaged. She'd read the articles. She'd watched the fallout. She said he'd done the same things to her: emotional control, gaslighting, reputation threats. Only in private, only where no one could intervene. She ended the letter with, "You're the reason people finally believe me." I read that part 3 times. It wasn't about validation, it was about evidence of a pattern, a predator in plain sight, and a system designed to look away. 3 days before the final hearing, our attorney warned us, "They're trying to force a shutdown. You might have to compromise." I asked, "What does that mean?" "Remove stories, limit user access, submit to corporate review boards." I looked at Ellis. He shook his head. "No," I said. "If we bend now, we become them." The final hearing was quieter than I expected. No cameras, no press, just papers, citations, arguments. The commission asked their questions. What protections are in place to prevent false reports? What liability are you assuming by connecting users with lawyers? Do you believe reputations can be ruined by your platform? I answered carefully. I believe reputations built on abuse should be ruined. They didn't like that, but they didn't interrupt. When it was over, we were told we'd get a decision within 30 days. That night, I found myself back at the park near my old apartment. I hadn't been there since everything began. I sat alone, watching people pass: friends, couples, kids chasing each other. I wondered what it felt like to live untouched by all this. Then I remembered something Ria once said during one of our check-ins. Survival isn't peace, but it's a place to start. I still didn't know if we'd win, but I knew we were needed. That was enough. 27 days later, the decision arrived. The commission ruled in our favor. Redline would remain active, no forced edits, no shutdown, no oversight. One commissioner's statement read, "The platform's existence reflects the failure of traditional systems to address workplace abuse. Suppressing it would only deepen public mistrust." They didn't praise us, but they didn't silence us. And that was the victory. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I opened my inbox, replied to Daniel, and said, "Thanks for speaking. You changed everything." Then I stared at the screen for a while, not thinking about Caleb or courtrooms or fear. Just about what happens when the silent finally speak and someone listens. I didn't notice the burnout until it stopped me mid-sentence. I was on a video call with a new legal partner, explaining Redline's intake protocol. I'd said the same things 100 times before: privacy filters, timestamping, verification flow. But halfway through the sentence, the words just vanished. My mouth moved. My brain didn't follow. I sat there, blinking at the screen, while the silence stretched. They didn't say anything, just nodded politely. I muttered something about a bad connection and ended the call early. Then I sat in the dark for a while, asking myself what I hadn't wanted to admit for months. Was this helping people? Yes. Was it helping me? I wasn't sure anymore. After the hearing, Redline surged, not just in users but in expectations. People saw us as saviors, avengers, counselors, lawyers. Some wrote us pages of their trauma. Others just sent 2 words: "Help me." And every time I saw one of those messages, I felt the weight again, not of what they wrote, but of how little I could actually fix. Ellis noticed. He tried to take more off my plate, suggested breaks, but I kept saying no, not because I didn't trust him, because I felt guilty leaving, even for a day. What if someone needed us right then? What if silence cost them something they couldn't get back? Then came a message I never expected. Subject: "Remember me," from Carter Langley. I froze. Carter was my college roommate. We hadn't spoken in almost 8 years. The last time I saw him, I was still with her, still naive, still sure that pain happened to other people. He was reaching out because of Redline, but not for help, for his brother, Micah Langley, 26. He'd taken a job at a financial startup a year ago, quit 2 weeks ago, no reason given. Since then, barely left his apartment. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. Carter had tried everything. Then he found out Micah had submitted something to Redline but never followed up. He was reaching out not as a friend, but as a last resort. I asked for permission to check our system. Micah's report was there, dated 2 months earlier. Brief but clear. Supervisor made repeated comments about my body, said I owed him for the opportunity. I laughed it off. Then he started moving my projects to someone else. I'm scared if I say anything I'll get blacklisted. There were no follow-ups, no lawyer selected, no counselor request. Just silence after submission. I called Carter and asked if I could speak to Micah directly. He paused, then said, "He thinks it's his fault, that he didn't say no soon enough, that he let it happen." That sentence gutted me, because I'd been there too, not in the same way, but close enough to know the voice in your head that tells you you're complicit just for surviving quietly. It took a few days, but Micah agreed to a video call. He barely spoke at first, just stared at the screen. Then, finally, he said, "Everyone tells you to report it, but when you do, it feels like no one's listening, like you're just a liability." I told him I understood. He didn't need advice. He needed someone who wouldn't look away. Over the next few weeks, we worked quietly behind the scenes, connected him with legal counsel, helped him draft a complaint. His company launched an investigation, internal of course, but the process mattered. The fact that he was taking it back mattered. Micah didn't want to go public. I didn't push. Some people want closure, others just want the damage to stop bleeding. A month later, I got another email from Carter. "Micah's better, he's eating again, said he wants to apply to grad school, just thought you should know." I sat with that line longer than I expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. It was simple, quiet, real. And that's what Redline had become, not a weapon, not a platform, but a lifeline. Still, I knew I couldn't stay at the center forever. I scheduled a meeting with Ellis, told him I needed time away, not to quit, just to breathe, to remember who I was before I became the story. He didn't argue. "You earned it," he said. So I stepped back, not out, just aside. In the quiet that followed, I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Reading books without checking my inbox between chapters, taking walks without scanning the crowd for familiar threats, sleeping through the night. One afternoon, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since my old job. She didn't recognize me at first. Then she blinked, stepped back and said, "You look different." I smiled, not out of pride, out of clarity, because I was different. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't seeking justice for the sake of revenge. I wasn't trying to fix the past. I was just trying to live. And that, after everything, was enough.